Good afternoon, and welcome to the February 6th, 2019 meeting of the Thousand Oaks Council on Aging. Would you please rise? Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. May we have roll call now, please?
Please stay here present when I call your name. Chair Gorbach?
Here.
Vice Chair Loretta Allen?
Present.
Commissioner Stephen Allen?
Here.
Commissioner Belding?
Here.
Commissioner Burt?
Here.
Commissioner Gitz?
Present.
Commissioner Maria?
Here.
Commissioner Mortimer?
Here.
And Commissioner Posta.
Here.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Number 4 on our agenda is time for public comments, and I have one public comment card, and I'd like to call Nancy Healy, one of our former commissioners, to the podium for her comments, please.
It right. At the speed, I mean, I never had it right before. The whole time I was there. I am here today to invite you guys and anybody in the audience, TV here, to please attend a meeting tomorrow for Conejo Valley Village. It is a Conejo Valley Village, for anyone who does not know, is a volunteer, all volunteer group that was formed about 3 years ago to help seniors stay in their home, not have to move to any kind of a facility if they don't want to, if they prefer to stay home, and stay involved in the community. The biggest problem we had, and Nick was in our first focus groups we did, that people complained to us about being a senior in this area, is they were isolated. They didn't see people, they didn't get out, they didn't know who to call if something happened, because many of us do not have families locally, many of us in California. The village formed, and I could never understand what people talked about being isolated, because I had been married for 45 years to the same person and been living in that same house all the time. Isolation was never my problem. But my husband passed away in 2015, and then I knew what isolation was about. I realized that I didn't just have somebody to say, hey, let's go to the movies, There was nobody to go with me. I could go myself, but it wasn't as fun. So I was working at the time, just total coincidence, on the formation of Conejo Valley Village. This group has meant so much to me, has filled in so many gaps in my life. I have made so many new friends. Coincidentally, one of our members, Hazel, is sitting right here, just sat down by me by accident. We have other members that are here. This is a wonderful organization for seniors. If you don't have people around, when we had those fires, my daughter lives in the Palisades. I'm not going to be calling her going, oh, quick, help me. I must have had 5 or 6 people from the village who call me and said, are you okay? Will you call somebody? So you are connected to people in this community that you know that are there to help you. We have a wonderful volunteer system. We provide rides to people who cannot drive themselves anymore, or maybe temporarily can't drive. There are lots of volunteer activities if you're interested in volunteering. Volunteering is the thing that makes it work. It's the thing that makes a senior's life work, in my own opinion. But there is an informational meeting tomorrow at the Global Center at 3:30. Please come. We have a Facebook page now. I wrote a letter to the Acorn last week. We've had a lot of stuff about this meeting. And I was just working today as a call manager for our group. I had 2 more new people sign up, but come, tell your friends to come. There's no obligation. You just go to the meeting, you learn about the services, the volunteer activities, and how you really feel connected to your community through this organization. The meeting's tomorrow, 3:30 to 5:30 at the Global Center, my other favorite place. And so please come. And if you have any questions, there's a number of people here who could probably answer them for you. Thank you very much. I hope to see you guys tomorrow. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nancy. And next on our agenda, number 5, and we have a special guest speaker today, and it's Jennifer Ward, who is a director of local government affairs for the Clean Power Alliance. I know a lot of us have a lot of interest in this, and we're very happy for you to join us today, Jennifer. I'd like to invite you to the podium.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Can you hear me okay? Great. So, again, thank you so much for having me. My name's Jennifer. I'm the head of local government affairs for Clean Power Alliance, which is the new community choice energy program or electricity provider for residents and soon-to-be businesses here in Thousand Oaks, as well as 30 other communities across Southern California. We're serving jurisdictions in both Ventura County and Los Angeles County. And so I'm excited today to be here to give you some background information on why Clean Power Alliance formed and how we operate, as well as what you are all probably interested in, your options as a customer, electricity consumer, and the options for your fellow community members here in Thousand Oaks. So I'll spend just a couple minutes talking through some slides. A lot of the information in my slides are also available in the handouts that I've passed out of the dais, as well as those that are back here. And I'm hoping to definitely answer a lot of questions that you might have today. And I'm happy to stay afterwards to answer questions from the audience. I also want to mention that Helen Cox from the City Sustainability Division is here as well if you have questions related to the city's participation. So Clean Power Alliance, we believe in a future that clean energy future that is local, where communities are empowered and customers have a choice in where their electricity comes from. And that's a choice. We really emphasize that word because it's a choice customers didn't previously have when Southern California Edison was the only option for your source of electricity. So we all know Southern California Edison is the existing utility that serves residents here in Thousand Oaks. And what Clean Power Alliance is doing is coming in as a second purchaser of energy supply and provider of that energy to customers. So customers now have a choice between getting their electricity provided by Clean Power Alliance or Southern California Edison. And then within Clean Power Alliance, you have a choice about how much renewable energy or how green you want to pay for on your electricity bill. So, like I said, we are a new clean energy supplier. Southern California Edison will continue to maintain all the infrastructure. They'll continue to send your electricity bill, your account information with Edison remains the same. We're not replacing Southern California Edison. We are now replacing the energy supply charges that all Edison customers pay for on their bill, and I'll talk about that as well. As I mentioned, Thousand Oaks is joined by 30 other communities across Southern California. 7 of the cities, as well as the county of Ventura, are participating in Clean Power Alliance, as well as a lot of the neighboring jurisdictions here in the Conejo Valley. So to give you a sense of the timing, when Clean Power Alliance formed, what we're offering customers, what the timing is for you to interact with your options and choices as an electricity consumer, we've actually been serving a small segment of customers since last year. We have been serving clean electricity to 30,000 customers in Los Angeles County. That was sort of our pilot phase. And this month in February is our big, what we call mass enrollment, and we are automatically starting to serve clean electricity to almost 1 million residential customers across Southern California, which includes about 50,000 customers here in Thousand Oaks, 45,000. So in terms of the timing, I just wanted to highlight that this service start date in February, it's not the same for every single resident here in Thousand Oaks. Your electricity source will start as Clean Power Alliance whenever your meter is read in the month of February. It's not like everyone started on February 1st. So it's essentially tied to your billing cycle, but throughout the course of February, we'll begin serving clean electricity to Thousand Oaks residents. And I also want to highlight that that automatic start to having Clean Power Alliance as your electricity provider is something the state of California requires of programs like ours. It's not an operational choice for us. When the state of California created the law that allows community choice programs to exist, and there's lots that exist up in Northern California, as well as a few others throughout Southern California. It has to be an automatic start for customers. So all Edison customers who live in jurisdictions that have joined a community choice program will automatically transition to their energy supply being provided by Clean Power Alliance unless you decide to opt out, which you can do at various points throughout the year, really at any time. So I just wanted to highlight that that's why that automatic transition occurs. And lastly, I'm here today to talk about residential options, but in a couple months, starting in May 2019, we're also going to be serving business customers, municipal customers, and other non-residential customers in Thousand Oaks and across our territory. So just to kind of get to just to highlight that, Clean Power Alliance, we are now purchasing power on your behalf from clean energy sources. We buy it from the market, the same place everyone else who buys electricity buys it. But because we're a new organization, we're able to, and a lean organization, we're set up as a public agency comprised of these 31 jurisdictions that have joined and a small team supporting that organization. We're able to purchase that power at much more competitive rates, which allows us to offer it to customers at a savings or a premium depending on the amount of renewable energy that we offer compared to Edison. So to get to kind of the meat and potatoes of what we do and what folks are really interested in is what are your options if you stay with Clean Power Alliance? So as I mentioned, depending on when your electric meter gets read this month, you'll start receiving Clean Power Alliance energy supplied to you through your Edison bill. And there's a second piece to keep in mind, in that whatever you start at, one of our 3 rate options, the starting point was chosen by the City of Thousand Oaks through the default process. So the city is allowed to choose the default rate option that Clean Power Alliance offers for Thousand Oaks customers. And the city chose 100% green power to really make a leadership statement in terms of moving our region towards a healthier environment, offering cleaner energy to customers. But that's just a starting point. It's because of the way automatic enrollment works, we default you into whatever rate option the city has selected, and then you as a customer can either do nothing and you'll stay at that rate option, or you can choose one of our other 2 rate options, which are Lean Power and Clean Power. And then again, if you don't like either of the 3 options from Clean Power Alliance, you can opt out and return to having Southern California Edison supply your electricity. So just to go through our 3 options, we have Lean, Clean, 100% green. We're very excited. It rhymes. And our bottom tier, Lean Power, is 36% renewable energy, which offers actually a 1% savings than what you would pay to Southern California Edison. And I'll mention that all 3 of our options provide more green content, more green energy than what Edison would provide you. The difference then is on the price. So our Lean Power is a little bit more green than what Edison provides, but it costs 1% less than what you would pay to Edison. Our middle tier is 50% renewable. We purchase 50% renewable on your behalf, and it costs the same as what you would pay to Edison to get about 30% renewable. And then, of course, 100% green power, we would go out and purchase 100% of your customer's energy need from renewable sources, but that costs about 7 to 9% more than what you would pay to Edison for base amount of renewables. So those are the options. As you can see, if you're someone who has a priority to contribute to the green economy, to support the environment, if those are some of your priorities, you would want to stay with our 100% green power option. If you're someone who wants to save a little bit of money on your electricity bill each month as compared to what you would pay to Edison, then you could pick one of our lower tier options. And then, of course, as a customer, if neither of these options are something that you are interested in, you're happy with your electricity service through Southern California Edison, because it's an automatic enrollment, you do have to let us know you just want to opt out and return to Southern California Edison. And you can opt out as well as choose any of our 3 rate options by visiting our website or contacting our customer service center. And I have the number here as well as on the last slide. I've also provided business cards with the customer service information out to everyone, and there's some behind me as well. So I just wanted to emphasize a couple things here about your customer choices and the timing. To choose between any of Clean Power Alliance's 3 rate options, lean, clean, and 100% green, you can do that anytime as a customer. There's no time limits, no deadlines. We don't charge you to switch between any of our rates. You can call up our customer service and they can place you on whichever rate you'd like to be charged. You can change your mind later and switch as many times as you want. To opt out, there's a couple different ways to do it as well. Again, you can call customer service, go on our website. If you have already opted out, well in advance of, this service starting now in February, we just won't enroll you. So if you're someone who's already opted out, you'll just stay with Southern California Edison as you currently have your service with them. Right now, we're in what's called a 60-day enrollment window, where there's a 60-day period of when your service starts with Clean Power Alliance. 60 days after that, you can still opt out and return to Edison during that time, but Edison will charge a one-time account processing fee, which is 50 cents right now. So within that 60-day window, they'll still return you to service, but they charge a 50 cents one-time fee. It could go up to maybe $2 or $3, but no more than $3, and right now it's only 50 cents. And then the last thing to keep in mind is, let's say you want to wait a couple months, you want to see what your bills look like with Clean Power Alliance, and still later, some point later in the year, you decide you want to return to Edison still. You can also opt out and return to their service at that time. There's just something to keep in mind when you return to Edison several months from now. They have the ability to charge you what are called transitional rates for 6 months. And those transitional rates could be slightly higher than what you were paying to Edison, but they could be lower. It just depends on what they're currently charging at that moment. And the way to avoid those transitional rates is to let us know you want to opt back to Edison, but you want to wait it out for 6 months with Clean Power Alliance. We can go ahead and put you on any of the rate options you'd like to be on. And then after 6 months, you transition back to Edison at the standard rates. So those are and we know it's a lot of different, new options for customers to keep in mind. But what we try to always remind people is that if you don't have to do anything. You're more than welcome to just stay with the default selection, which is a couple extra dollars on your bill a month, but to get 100% green power. If you don't like that option, you do have to, take a step as a customer, but our customer service is open 7 days a week on the phone and is able to help process those changes with customers over the phone. The last thing I just wanted to mention, you might have, read this in the news or heard about it. Edison is also anticipating to raise rates on all of its customers this year. That's not something that has to do with Clean Power Alliance. It's totally out of our control, but that's one of the reasons that we tell customers, Edison is looking to raise people's rates this year. And so if your bill goes up because of Edison and then you're someone who wants to make it go back down a little bit, our Lean Power product does have that 1% savings as compared to what you would pay to Edison. So just something you might hear in the news or from Edison as well over the next couple months. So those are the main choices and options that customers have. There's one of the handouts I provided is on financial assistance that is still available to all of our customers. The CARE program, for example, offers a 30% bill discount to folks who qualify, and there's various ways to qualify, including receiving Medi-Cal or Medicaid already. Our medical baseline program provides extra energy on your bill for those who use medically powered equipment. And actually here in Thousand Oaks, the city is offering, and Clean Power Alliance is offering the 100% green power at no additional cost to anyone who's on these financial assistance programs. And you don't have to reapply or re-enroll. If you're currently a CARE customer with Edison, you'll stay as part of that program. So that's the last thing I wanted to highlight. And again, we totally understand that a lot of these choices for energy customers is new. To be honest, before I started this job, I had never looked at my electricity bill. I just put it on auto pay and it goes, the money goes every month. But by having a community choice program in your community, we're actually helping a lot of people better understand where their electricity comes from, how they can contribute to supporting more renewable energy, or how they can save some money on their bill if that's what they're interested in. So we hope customers are, we hope to make more customers aware of their choices and help them interact with their new options. So I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any, and I'm happy to stick around.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jennifer. I have a question.
Yes.
Can you please explain a little more what we mean by clean energy, by clean electricity? Because in my head, I'm thinking that you're getting some of your electricity maybe from solar farms or from wind farms, like out in Palm Springs. You see all the windmills, but I don't. Is that accurate, or am I like totally
absolutely.
stupid?
No, you're not. That's a great observation. So when we say clean energy, we follow the state's rules. They actually kind of certify what's considered truly renewable power, and that allows us to say we're purchasing 100% renewable power on your behalf as a customer. And the sources of that renewable power are a variety. So we do purchase a lot of solar power. We also purchase a lot of wind power. So those, wind turbines that you see on the way out to Palm Springs or up through the Central Valley, we purchase power from there. We also purchase some other sources of renewable power, such as hydropower that's generated. And like I said, we purchase that energy kind of from the energy market, where a lot of power suppliers purchase energy across the state of California and really the western states as a whole. So by more of our customers and more of our communities choosing those higher tier options, the 100% green power option or the clean power option, it means we as an organization then have to purchase more of that renewable power from renewable sources and are kind of supplying the grid that feeds all of our electricity with more green energy rather than dirty energy.
Great, thank you very much.
Of course.
And Commissioner.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi.
One of the things that you see as you travel around the city, of course, is you see a lot of people with rooftop solar. And whether they be leased or owned, it could be if they're already getting renewable energy. Is there not a recommendation, but a smart move in terms of understanding the lean power, the 36%, because that person or that group is getting lean power as it is? So how can you address something along those lines? Because there is quite a few customers in the city that fit that bill.
Sure, that's a great question, and we hear from our solar customers a lot. So I would say there's pros and cons to choosing any of our Clean Power Alliance options if you're a solar customer. One of the pros is that your bill, if you do have solar, is likely already pretty low. So if you choose that lean power product, it means that we're going to charge you the rate for electricity that you do use when you're pulling electricity from the grid rather than generating it or using it from your own solar system. We're going to charge you for the cost for 36% renewable content, which is slightly cheaper than what you'd pay to Edison. So if you're a solar customer and your bill's really low, opting to the lean power option might make it even lower. If you're a solar power customer and your bill's really low or medium and you opt to our higher tier option, it might make it go up a little bit. I will say something to keep in mind if you do have solar and you currently are on Edison's Net Energy Metering Program, or NEM, which is a program where they kind of track your generation over the course of the year and reimburse you if you generate excess or charge you if you don't generate excess. That program still exists when you become a Clean Power Alliance customer, but the timing is a little bit different. So for example, the time of the year that you get either charged or reimbursed changes when you join Clean Power Alliance. So that's maybe a con for you or a downside for you, depending on when you like to see that bill come through. But a pro is that when you do generate excess power, Clean Power Alliance reimburses you at a slightly better rate than Edison. So if you're a solar customer, that's great. You're clearly someone who's already sort of thought about their energy usage in their home. And I would definitely encourage you to call our service center and they can take a look at your account and see what makes the most sense for you and tell you about that timing.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions? Matias? Yes, Commissioner Posta?
Yes. I noticed you have the Care, FARA, and medical baseline programs that helps people in need, poor people and so on. I'm interested in deals for seniors. Do you have any specific programs for senior citizens, if you will?
Not specifically tailored at senior citizens. However, the Care, FARA, and medical baseline programs, there's actually a lot of different ways to qualify for those. It's not just income-based. So, for example, the medical baseline program, if you're someone who uses equipment in your home that's powered by electricity or requires a lot of power, Edison will give you a discount for that, or they'll give you extra energy at no cost for that equipment. The CARE program, for example, it also applies to anyone, who's on a variety of different other public assistance programs. So we don't have anything specifically targeted at senior citizens. However, some folks might already be participating in these programs. If you're not, I would say check out the program and see if you qualify. A lot of people think the programs are just for low-income citizens, but they're not. They're for a variety of different people who can qualify for other reasons. So. And then just, of course, all of our customers always have the option to choose the lower tier if they wanted to have some savings on their bill. Our customer service center has, people that can help do it for you, walk you through. If you don't have access to a computer, we have the ability to mail confirmations through the mail, if you don't have email or something like that. So we try to help out all of our customers, but we don't have any programs specifically for that.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Allen.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a question.
My pleasure.
You mentioned that Edison was looking at some rate increases in the near future. So could you talk to how CPA is regulated in increasing or changing their rates? And are they regulated any differently than Edison?
Yeah, great question. So we are regulated differently. The investor-owned utilities, such as Edison and PG&E, they are regulated by the State Public Utilities Commission, who is located up in San Francisco, and they have to approve any rate increase or rate change that Edison makes. Us as a local government organization, we have one elected official. So Councilwoman Claudia Bill de la Pena from Thousand Oaks sits on our board, as well as a mayor council member from the other 30 communities. And that board is our regulator. They are the rate setting authority. They establish our governance policies, which again is another brings comfort to our customers, knowing that they are held accountable locally here to those citizens rather than us being held accountable to a state department up in San Francisco. So our board is committed to providing those rate savings and premiums we showed customers for our 2019 rates. And when we set rates in the future, which will typically be on a yearly basis, we're always going to have our core mission, which again, our local electeds are held accountable for, in providing competitive and affordable rates as compared to Edison. So it's directly governed by the local members.
Okay, thank you for that information. I have one more question.
Of course.
You mentioned that Edison would continue to maintain the infrastructure, which is certainly a cost to their business operations. Mm-hmm. How does CPA relate to providing any reimbursement or money to Edison for their maintaining the infrastructure that you'd be selling your power?
Great question. So all customers continue to pay, whether you stay with Clean Power Alliance or return to Edison, you continue to pay transmission and delivery charges to Edison on your Edison bill. And then if you stay with Clean Power Alliance, so you'll pay Edison for transmission and delivery and Clean Power Alliance for supply. Those customers who stay with Edison just pay Edison for both charges. So one of the handouts is a sample bill, and you'll see your bill broken up into delivery charges, which you'll always pay to Edison, and those go to support the maintenance and service of the lines and wires. And then as an electricity supplier, we get your fees or your rates for the energy supply.
Okay. And then one quick last question on the different sources, the different generating sources of electricity. How could we find out information of where Edison is obtaining their power, very specifically, which power plants, which hydro plants, which renewable sources, mm-hmm. and the same thing for CPA, because I would assume that's an ongoing brokerage exchange.
Yeah, it is ongoing. It is ongoing for both Clean Power Alliance and Edison and any electric provider. You can look at what's called their power content label, and I'd be happy to send a link to that for both our website as well as Edison's. But it just generally breaks down the sources of the power. We don't necessarily publicize every single power contract provider we enter into for market sensitive information in order to be able to stay competitive, which is a industry practice. But we are required to kind of post where our power comes from and the sources, as well as Edison also does that.
And the term for that was power
It's power
content?
content label.
Thank you very
So,
much.
or even if you just search power sources, it should come up. But I'll send you the link.
Thank you. Commissioner Gitt.
Good presentation. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, is Clean Power Alliance profit or nonprofit?
We are a nonprofit in the sense that we are not, a shareholder-based organization. We're not a 501c3 nonprofit. We're a public agency, and so any of the rates that we collect from our customers go to purchase that power and to run our operations. One of the reasons we're also able to remain competitive against Edison is we have 10 employees and they have well over 10,000. So we're just, a leaner organization and in that way. But we're not a shareholder organization.
Okay. How do you know that the sources you're buying from are clean? Do you monitor them, or does other organizations monitor them? Do they certify it?
Yes, absolutely. We go out and purchase from renewable sources, and while we're not regulated by the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission, in terms of how we operate and set our rates, we do have to report the energy that we purchase to the state, to both the California Public Utilities Commission and the California Energy Commission, to demonstrate that we're purchasing as much renewable power as we said, and to certify that it is from qualified renewable sources. So we do have some reporting requirements to the state departments that regulate that.
So even if the power comes from outside the state, it's still certified, or you have some way of knowing that it's clean?
Absolutely.
Okay. I happen to have a bunch of solar panels, and I get money back each year. I don't pay any money for my electricity. So how is that going to affect me in terms of what these three levels are involved with?
Sure. So if you pay something every month, then the electricity you are paying for, you'd get charged for it, whatever rate option you choose with Clean Power Alliance. If you're someone who has a surplus at the end of the year and you get like a check from Edison, we'll also provide you that check for surplus, and actually we pay 10% more than what Edison pays for your net surplus. But again, I would definitely encourage you to call our customer service center, because the timing about when we kind of settle that solar generation versus usage and pay it out differs from what you might be used to with Edison. So I would just encourage you to ask about the timing.
Okay, and then, so am I going to get, if I were to join this, am I going to get two bills, one from Edison every month and one from you? Or
No.
is the usage charge included in yours?
That's right. So you'll continue to get one bill. Your SCE account number will stay the same. You'll see your transmission and delivery charges from Edison on the top. And then within your SCE bill, it has, their logo on it and everything still. You'll see Clean Power Alliance charging you for your energy supply.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. My pleasure.
Very nice presentation. Thank you so much. And I'd like to call now on Commissioner Mortimer, who will introduce our next guest speaker.
Thank you, Karen. Dr. Mark Susky received his MD degree from Georgetown University Medical School. He completed his residency in general surgery at the UC Davis East Bay program and his plastic surgical training at New York Hospital Cornell Medical Center in Manhattan. He received fellowship training in cosmetic surgery at the Institute of Aesthetic Medicine and Surgery in Westchester, New York. He is board certified in both general and plastic surgery and is a member of many regional and national surgical societies. Dr. Susky is proud to be part of American Board of Plastic Surgery Fellow, diplomat of the American Board of Plastic Surgery, and American College of Surgeons. Please welcome Dr. Susky.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that very generous introduction. I think for the purposes of this talk, which is preventing skin injury as we age, I'd like to just comment, obviously as a plastic surgeon, predominantly doing reconstructive work, and I'm also the medical director of our local hospital, Las Robles' outpatient wound care center. So wound care, preventing wounds, treating wounds, is certainly a passion to me. I hope to encourage, hopefully I'll be able to disseminate some of that passion to you and hopefully not go over time, because when I start talking about this kind of a topic, I can go on forever. So please keep me under time. Why are we talking about this topic? Preventing skin injury as we age. What we're really talking about with that topic is really wound care and the prevention and treatment of wounds. And the reason for this is really disseminated on this slide. The demographics of an aging population with a higher rate of diabetes and other comorbid conditions associated with obesity is unfortunately the perfect storm for a higher rate of both acute and more importantly, chronic wounds. This is absolutely true in this country and is unfortunately becoming also true worldwide. If you look at the numbers, it's actually overwhelming. These are numbers from approximately 2010, so you could probably almost double these numbers. But chronic wounds affect approximately 6.5 million Americans at any given time at a cost, from a treatment perspective, of at least $25 billion per year. If you throw in lost wages, lost tax revenue from being off work, you're looking at another almost $40 billion. And if you just look at the cost of wound care products, dressings, medications, you're throwing in another almost $15 billion a year. So when you put these all collectively together from a CMS or Medicare perspective, the treatment of wounds is actually one of the highest overall treatments that Medicare pays out on a yearly basis. These are just some of the types of wounds that we see. I was just at the Wound Care Center this morning attending to patients. Obviously, there's some that are very common to people in this room, the so-called venous ulcers, pressure ulcers, diabetic ulcers, arterial ulcers, surgical wounds, sometimes related to post-op complications, basic traumatic wounds. Those are all pretty much known. But when we're talking about unusual wounds, we're talking about things like the flesh-eating bacteria or the necrotizing infections, talking about wounds that are caused by some of our treatment, and particularly radiation-induced injuries, which are incredibly difficult to treat. And of course, bone infection, which is also very difficult to treat. So that just gives you a little bit of an unfortunate flavor of what kind of wounds exist out in the community. Now, it's impossible to really talk about a wound without doing a little anatomy regarding the skin, and this is just a quick cartoon. The main things that I want to highlight here are there are two layers to the skin. There's the superficial layer, which is referred to as the epidermis. This is the layer of the skin that really functions as a barrier function. When you get a sunburn, this is what will eventually peel off. This is the area that's constantly rejuvenating itself, sort of exfoliating itself. But the most important layer of the skin is the second layer, which is actually at least 3/4 of the diameter of the skin. And that's going to be the dermis. That's where you have all of your important proteins like collagen, elastin. It also is where you have your lubricating oil glands, which is also very important to overall skin health. And then directly underneath that is the subcutaneous or the fatty layer of the skin. And that, as we'll see as the presentation continues, is also very important in overall skin health, mainly because most of the blood vessels that supply the skin come through that area. And as we'll see, with aging, each of these areas undergoes certain very characteristic changes that unfortunately impact the ability of the skin to eventually heal. So in summary, these are going to be some of those changes that we see, and they're very reproducible. So again, the outer layer of the skin, the epidermis, is going to thin. So we're going to lose some of the immediate barrier function just from that process alone. The deeper layers of the skin, again, the dermis, which has the collagen and the elastin, are also going to thin out, and that is going to cause a laxity in the skin. So unfortunately, as one ages, one of the complaints on the cosmetic side of plastic surgery is that people lose that nice tone in their face. This is one of the reasons why that happens. And of course, we live in California, so the long-term sun exposure hastens all of this, and all of these things occur at a much quicker rate. Again, you're going to lose elasticity, you're going to lose resilience, you're going to lose strength. So what used to be, you know, when we were kids and you took a fall against a rug or against grass, at best you might have a small abrasion. Unfortunately, when you're in your 70s, 80s, and 90s and you sustain that same kind of level of trauma, you're going to have a really significant wound. Your skin is just absolutely going to tear with a lot less ability to heal. The other thing that's interesting is that the melanocytes, which are the cells that are located sort of at that superficial and deep layer in the skin, that's what gives people pigmentation. Those also change. Unfortunately, they're not produced at the same rate that they were in youth, and the ones that remain tend to get more prominent. So a lot of complaints that we hear from patients is, why do I have those spots on my arms or on my legs? And again, it's just a normal component of aging. The other things that occur is that the blood vessels themselves that are coming up from the fat also become more fragile, because we're also going to lose fat as we age. That's the other problem. So we're losing, everything is thinning out. Our skin is thinning out, our fat is thinning out. So any of the structures that are in the skin or the fat, unfortunately, they're going, you know, we're going to lose that ability, that insulation, if you will. And again, that's why, you know, many times a grandparent will say, my new grandchild just kind of pinched at my arm and I now have a bruise. That's why they have a bruise. They don't have to be on a blood thinner to get that bruise. Again, it's related to the fact that those blood vessels are going to break a lot quicker. Same thing when we see elderly patients in the emergency department. They'll take a very incidental fall, and suddenly, you know, they've got this large hematoma or blood collection, and they'll say, how come 20 years ago I didn't have this? You know, I used to play football. Again, this is the problem. You know, everything is thinning out, so these things are just breaking at a quicker rate. The other complaint that almost everybody has, males and females, is as I'm aging, my skin is becoming drier. I have to use more moisturizer. Again, that's related to the fact that the oil glands are also not being produced at the same rate. The ones that are there are not producing the same amount of lubricating oil. And again, when you have a dry skin, the wound is going to, you know, the skin is going to chafe, and it's going to be, again, less resilient to very incidental trauma. And so moisturizer becomes a very significant issue. Most women are very comfortable with this, but men are not. It's hard to get us to shave in the morning. And so it's very difficult to get men to really understand how important it is to continue to lubricate, you know, your skin with moisturizing agents. So these are some pictures of some of the problems related to injuries related to the skin. And again, this is a very common injury that we see all the time. It's a so-called skin tear. And, you know, for all the reasons we discussed, you know, skin is thinning, the fat is thinning, resiliency is going down. Very incidental traumas can cause this. You know, we've had people who have literally been helped, just, you know, someone's coming by and saying, I'll help you lift off the chair. And by just doing that, you know, suddenly they get a skin tear. Or their dog, I just had treated a lady recently whose dog just jumped on her bed. Her paw hit her skin, created a large, you know, skin tear. Again, grandchildren, children just touching the skin, having a blood pressure cuff put on, just crazy things. Very incidental traumas can lead to these kind of situations. They're very common. They're very difficult to treat because the skin is pretty much completely devitalized, kind of ripped off, if you will, from the underlying tissue. They're very common on the extremities, in particular the arms and the legs. And again, they can be caused from incidental trauma related to just banging into doors, you know, chairs, pets, grandchildren. We see this very commonly in the evening hours when people are getting up at night to go to the restroom, and they're banging into furniture and so forth in their houses. This is generally the way we try to treat them. You know, if this happens, you know, you want to immediately probably present to a doctor's office or the ER, urgent care. What you basically want to do is whatever's remaining of that skin, you want to kind of smooth out and sort of redrape it, if you will, across the underlying fat, and then put a dressing on it. And then we basically leave that dressing alone for approximately 1 week and essentially hope for the best. We jokingly say we trust in biology. It's either going to work or it's not. And I would say majority of the time, if you come in an early time frame, at least 85 to 90% of the time, the wounds will heal in this situation. So skin tear prevention starts, again, keeping the skin hydrated. I can't overemphasize this point enough. You really have to get in the habit of a daily moisturizing situation. You want to keep your body hydrated. So again, we're out here in California. It's always, everyone's drinking, I see. We get really dehydrated. And in fact, this is kind of beyond the scope of this presentation, but most patients in their 70s, 80s, and 90s are probably clinically dehydrated at any given time frame. They're just not drinking enough water. They're not probably eating enough. And so that just exacerbates this kind of a problem. And then you'll see here on the picture those blue arms. That's something called the Derma Saver. And basically what that is, this is something that a patient actually brought to my attention. This is basically a garment that you put on over your arms or legs. And it basically is a barrier so that in the event that you do bang up against something or you fall, or gardening is another very common location where these skin tears occur, you basically first have an interface, against the environment. And these can be, remarkably, really life-saving. I had I call her an infamous patient, but a really nice lady in her late 90s who continually was getting skin tears, on her lower extremities. And they were occurring at her assisted care facility when she was eating meals with her friends, because one of her friends had a really bad condition of restless leg syndrome. So every time they were sitting there at the table, she was inadvertently being kicked, and unfortunately was causing these skin tears. So this device really, saved their friendship, to be honest. And she was able to continue to socialize at her assisted care facility. So it's a very simple thing. They're on the internet, and people should be aware of them. The other area that we, again, get a lot of talks, and people come to the Wound Care Center constantly with what they perceive as a wound, and really what it is just a normal variant of aging, or it's a skin cancer. And so I think, again, because we live here in California where there's just, skin cancers are just so abundant because of our chronic sun exposure, it's worthwhile just going over a few of these kind of issues. These are just examples here of just benign skin conditions, what the dermatologists would currently refer to as photoaging, meaning just the normal exposure to the sun, which just basically damages skin and causes, again, in some cases, pigmentation issues. They can be of any color, they can be purple, they can be white, they can be brown. What you're looking at here really is something we call a seborrheic keratosis. This used to be referred to as the so-called age spot. They have a very characteristic appearance as well as a characteristic feel. They're very glossy, and they appear almost attached to the skin. They're totally benign. They're not going to turn into a skin cancer, but patients are not happy with these in any way, shape, or form. And again, these are just other variations on the theme. Some of the different colorations, especially the red ones and the purple ones, are again related to the changes that's going on in the fat in the skin, which is allowing for a little bit more of the blood vessels to become a little bit more prominent. And again, people get very concerned by these. In some cases, they'll actually start to open up and bleed a little bit. But again, they're completely benign. There's really not a whole lot that you need to do about them. Of course, on the flip side, you can have skin lesions that are either cancerous or precancerous. And those are worthwhile, again, being aware of. Again, patients bring this to our attention all the time. As one ages, because you have the chronic sun exposure, the rate of precancerous skin lesions and skin cancers are going to increase. Again, they can have a lot of different appearances, associated with them. The premalignant ones tend to have a sort of a crusty look, almost a scaly look to them. Those are called AKs, or actinic keratoses. Many people have had experience with those. Those are those little lesions that the dermatologist or the primary care doctors are spending time with the liquid nitrogen, freezing them and so forth. And usually, as long as they don't come back, treatment's been rendered. Unfortunately, if they do come back, or if they're not treated, they can actually lead to a particular skin cancer called a squamous cell skin cancer, which is a very common skin cancer that we see. Again, most skin cancers, most precancerous lesions are going to be mainly on the areas that are exposed to the sun. So the most common areas are going to be the face and neck, but also the extremities, particularly the lower extremities on women, probably related to the types of clothing worn, in their youth and so forth. And again, these are very characteristic images of actinic keratoses. And they kind of have that very scaly, almost a plaque-like look to them. Very common. In fact, you see many of us have been to the dermatologist and will come out with, 15 or 20 areas that have been liquid nitrogen. Then, of course, you have another variant, which are going to be the actual skin cancers themselves. So I think most people are aware there are three major types of skin cancers. There's the basal cell and the squamous cell, which are very common, generally just need to be treated with a local excision. As long as the margins of the tumor are clear, there's nothing to worry about. They're not going to spread. Nobody is certainly going to have any mortality associated with them. And then the third or the worst type is the melanoma, which we'll discuss in a little bit more detail. That one, unfortunately, can lead to death in some circumstances. So again, we see a lot of patients who will come in with what they see as an ulcer. Men will sometimes say, I keep shaving every day and I keep nicking myself in the same spot for the past 6 months. It's not that they're nicking themselves. Unfortunately, it's probably that there's a skin cancer there and they're just, constantly irritating it. The women will come in thinking that they have a variation of acne or a little cyst. Those tend to be the two most common presentations of the basal cell. The main thing is if you have an open wound on your face or anywhere else on your body and it hasn't responded to certainly a few weeks of, let's say, antibiotic ointment, it's probably worthwhile to have one of your physicians take a look at it. In my line of work, it would be a skin cancer till proven otherwise, and generally would require a biopsy. And again, these are the two types of very common presentation of skin cancers. You can certainly see how a patient would wake up one day and feel that that's a wound, and it's treated as a wound for quite a while before really realizing, many patients are not aware that a cancer can actually, present as a wound. The good news is that the wound goes away as soon as the cancer has been treated, and it's usually a very simple excision that can be done under local anesthesia in the office. On the, the left side of that screen, you see the raised version of a basal cell, the so-called papule, or the dermatologists like to call it the pearl. But this is very common. You see this a little bit more in women for whatever reason. The second type is the squamous cell skin cancer, which is, statistically speaking, the second most common. Unlike an ulcerated or a raised type of a lesion, these tend, again, although they will bleed and so forth, they tend to be very scaly in appearance, kind of look a little bit like those actinic keratoses that we had spoken about a little bit earlier. And they, again, are not going to be fatal. There's a very small rate of spread, which is beyond the confines of this talk, but those are usually only noted, they're not going to spread to the lymphatics unless they've been there for many, many years. And these are versions. And again, on men, the ear is a very common location for skin cancers, and that's another one, unfortunately, on the lower lip. But, we see patients who will live with these for sometimes 6, 12 months, sometimes even 18 months, because they really either think it's a wound, their family thinks it's a wound, or in some cases, even their doctors think it's a wound. But again, you have to always, a general wound should heal within 3 weeks. If it doesn't heal within 3 weeks, there's something else going on. It's not a normal wound problem. And then, of course, it's, I think, worthy to speak about a melanoma. That's the most aggressive type of a skin cancer. That's the one you don't really want to ever be told that you have or that anybody's considering. Not all of them are fatal, and I think that's important to emphasize, because a lot of patients, they hear that word and they immediately get very, very nervous, understandably. The main issue to understand here is that these are thought to develop from pre-existing moles. So this is why your primary care doctor or your dermatologist is oftentimes going to be looking at all of the moles that you have on your body. And there's been a correlation. People who have more moles are more likely to potentially develop a melanoma in the future. So it's really important, probably living in California, everyone should be seen by either a primary care doctor or a dermatologist at least once a year for a good total body skin exam, more frequently, of course, if you have a history of skin cancer. Most of us are aware of the A, B, C, D, and E's of skin cancer surveillance, but I think it's worthwhile to review this real quick. So A is asymmetry. If you look on the left, the pink, that's just a standard raised mole. Looks very normal, nothing really unfortunate about that appearance. You can see on the left side, the blackened lesion. obvious asymmetry. That's something you don't want to be just looking at on a daily basis. You need to bring that to someone's attention. B is a border irregularity. Again, you can see, moles can either be raised or they can be flat. This is a flat one. It's a perfect circle. Nobody's going to recommend that be biopsied. That's nothing to be concerned about. You can see on the again, I guess the left side, the irregular border. It almost looks like a Rorschach, situation. C is color. As long as the color is consistent, homogeneous in color, that's going to be, generally speaking, a normal variation. Again, you can see that, when you have multicolors within the same lesion, again, you have to stop. You have to think that needs to be looked at by someone and obviously biopsied. D is the diameter. It's easy to have this conversation here because we all grew up with number 2 pencils. My kids and so forth don't know what I'm talking about, but basically the old rule is that an eraser on a number 2 pencil is 6 millimeters. So if you have a mole that's larger than the eraser on a pencil, that's an abnormal size, and that's something that you want to again have looked at. And again, the concept is that a benign mole over the course of time can unfortunately work its way through to a full-blown melanoma. So I can tell you that in our community, the dermatologists are biopsying things much more frequently than I've ever seen before, and they're coming up with more and more unfortunate diagnoses of skin cancer. I've even seen this in the pediatric age group, in the teenagers and the preteens. In the past, they used to just follow those. Now they're being much more aggressive, and they're picking them up at earlier stages, which is very good. But you can't just you can't just say because it's a child to not biopsy a suspicious-looking skin lesion. So in terms of skin cancer prevention, you want to continue to use sunscreen. I think that's very, very important. I'm always asked by patients, let's say they're in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, I've already had so much sun exposure, what's the benefit of putting on sunscreen at this point? Well, there is a benefit. As we discussed earlier, as you age, your skin thins. So the same sun exposure that you had at the age of 20, if you're out in the sun for 2 or 3 hours, your skin was much more vibrant, much more resilient. It's not going to get burned. It's going to be more of a barrier function. You do the same thing in your 90s with the thin skin that you have, you're certainly at higher likelihood of developing a burn. And at the easiest thing, and the worst situation would be, again, you're going to have a lot more sun exposure. It's interesting to note that about 85% of our overall sun exposure is actually encountered before the age of 18. So this is why it's so important for grandchildren and children to be wearing sunscreen from their earliest ages on up. Now, I will tell you that I have children now in high school, and when they were young at the park, if any kid had a little bit of redness on them, every mother ran out and was slathering them in sunscreen, and so they grew up with it. In fact, they, in my case, if I'm not wearing sunscreen, they wear the hats, they wear the clothing. It's really been ingrained in them, and unfortunately, despite that, we're still seeing increased rates of skin cancer. So the question is whether or not the doctors are getting better at biopsying more frequently, that the patients are coming in more frequently to get things biopsied, or if there is some truth to the ozone, situation, because clearly people are using sunscreen much more frequently than they ever did in the past. The second thing is you want to limit your sun exposure. So I think most of us who live in California have been taught over the years that, the worst sun is really between about 10 and 2 p.m. in the afternoon. They're now, dermatologists are extending it out a little bit more to 4 p.m. for what it's worth. You want to make sure that you do have, someone looking at your skin on a frequent basis, and you should be doing self-exams. So, pretty much you should have an idea of what lesions you have on your skin, and if there's any sense of change, you want to bring it again to somebody's attention. So we're going to touch base on another group of wounds that are very, very common. Again, I was at the Woundcare Center this morning. I think I saw 5 patients alone who have what we call, venous insufficiency or venous stasis disease. And again, just for basic anatomy and terminology, we have both arteries and veins. Arteries pump blood from the heart out to the body, And then we have veins that return the blood from the extremities and so forth back to the heart. They're very different structures, and therefore they have two different types of wounds that can occur. But venous disease is very common. Many people have it. It can be as simple as just those little spider veins that you see on legs in particular. They can progress to varicose veins, which are those really big thickened veins. Patients who have really bad varicose veins can have very swollen legs. They can start having color changes in those legs, and in the worst case scenario, they can lead to an actual ulcer. And the reason for that is that veins have valves in them. So when I'm standing upright like this, the blood will pool down in the legs, and then the muscles contract, and they kind of start jettisoning the blood back up with the valves sort of keeping it in the system. If the valves are diseased or damaged, the blood just pools in the leg, which is why you get the swelling, eventually the color problems, and then eventually the wound itself. The treatment for these is generally compression therapy. So a lot of people are used to wearing compression socks. I know a lot of teachers will do this, surgeons, nurses, people who are on their feet for most of the day. Try to use them preventively, but if you get to this stage, then you really have to use it from a therapeutic standpoint. And these can be very, very challenging wounds. They're very painful in many respects, and patients carry around a lot of water weight in their legs. In fact, I've had patients who pre-treated, they'll have an extra 10 or 15 pounds in some cases on each leg just being there. And there are some other treatments that, can be done. And again, leg swelling is very common. Not all leg swelling is related to venous disease, of course, but it's not normal, and it should be looked at, certainly. And again, if you have wounds associated with leg swelling, it's most likely going to be a venous type of an ailment that you're going to have. And again, the mainstay is really compression stocking use. You can, of course, also have the problems in the arterial system. Again, that's the system that pumps the blood from the heart to the legs. So that's an area where, oxygen, nutrients, and if you have blockages, those are not going to be disseminated downstream, as we say. And small trauma can lead to really bad wounds, which can unfortunately also lead to things like amputation and so forth, which we don't want. And again, these are easily treated if brought to somebody's attention. Usually our vascular surgical colleagues get involved, and the blockages, much like in the heart, are simply opened up or stented, and that would be the treatment of choice for that. Again, this is just an example of a foot wound that was caused by blockage of arterial blood flow, and as soon as the arterial blood flow was reinstituted, within a month, this wound healed very quickly. You cannot talk about wounds without talking about diabetes, unfortunately. And in particular, if you look at Americans 65 years and older, at least a quarter of them have diabetes. That's a huge number in medicine. It's not you're not gonna pass a test with a 25%, but in medicine, that's a really horrific number. And you can see, it's the 7th leading cause of death, and it's probably underreported, so it's probably higher. Everyone knows all of the complications of diabetes that exist and so forth. But the bottom line is that if your blood glucose or your blood sugars are not well controlled, the ability to heal is actually significantly compromised. So it's really important, to work with your primary care physician or endocrinologist if you do have diabetes. One of the big issues in diabetes that people aren't aware of is almost everyone's aware of the morbidity, if you will, meaning all of the problems. You can have blindness, you can have kidney disease, you can end up with amputations. People are aware of this and obviously frightened, to be blunt, of those kind of complications. But even despite that, many patients have a hard time being compliant with the instructions given to them. I would just like to add, unfortunately, that a diabetic who has an amputation has about a 50% mortality rate, 50% chance of dying within the next 5 years. So there's a real, mortality associated with patients who choose not to be particularly compliant with their diabetic management. And again, talking about a wound, this is a very characteristic location of a diabetic foot ulcer. It's basically right at that's called the plantar surface of the foot or the sole of the foot. And the reason they form there is that there's a bony prominence where the toes and the bones of the foot meet, and that's a very high pressure point. And so many people who are diabetics, understandably have relationships with podiatrists and so forth to be in proper shoes and so forth in order to help prevent this and to treat it. And then many patients, unfortunately, as they age, are also much more prone to developing things called pressure ulcers. So again, we talked earlier in the presentation that as one ages, we lose a lot of fat. We also maldistribute the fat. So fat that was in certain areas, goes away in certain areas and forms in other areas. Unfortunately, it usually goes away in the areas where we want to have the fat, and that would be over prominent pressure points and so forth. So we see a lot of pressure sores in the hospital setting. We see a lot of pressure sores in assisted care, skilled nursing facilities, and obviously in the wound care center, this is an unfortunate, very common wound that we see. It's easy to say that you have to relieve the pressure, but it's a lot harder to actually do it on a regular basis. But that's really the mainstay of pressure sore treatment. You need to relieve the pressure. So a lot of patients who have had pressure sores in the past, they are going to be given special types of beds. They're going to be given special types of cushions to sit on. They're going to be told to relieve the pressure on a regular basis. It's very interesting to note and important to note that a pressure sore can actually start to form within 20 minutes of completely unrelieved pressure. 20 minutes, that's all it takes. And, we see this a lot in paralyzed patients, either, or quadriplegic patients, because they simply don't move. So 20 minutes goes by really, really fast. And for many of those patients, they understandably spend up sometimes 20 hours in a wheelchair a day. It's so difficult to get into the wheelchair. If they don't have a proper cushion, this is going to happen. For the rest of us, even when we're sleeping, people always say, well, I'm sleeping, I'm not moving. Well, you are moving. You're moving enough to relieve the pressure, but all it takes is 20 minutes. And for the elderly population, if there's any type of moisture incontinence associated with their overall condition, now you've got pressure, unrelieved pressure, made worse by either fecal or urinary incontinence. And that is unfortunately very, very common. So one of the things we have to talk about are people who have to use Depends or garments like that. It's frequent changes and so forth. You can't just stay in the same garment for the 24-hour period and so forth. And these unfortunately also can lead to very bad infections and can lead to death. I think most people are aware that Christopher Reeves, who had access to probably the best healthcare in the country, ultimately died of an infected pressure sore at a young age, relatively speaking. So as we're getting towards the end of this journey, I wanted to emphasize some of the preventative measures. We talked a little bit about, the constant moisturizing. I really keep coming back to that over and over again. But again, most elderly patients are absolutely clinically dehydrated, so it's very, very important to continue to keep yourself well hydrated. That would be non-caffeinated drinks, non-alcoholic drinks, but you really want to have, that classic 6 to 8, glasses of water a day. You also want to maintain adequate calories, in addition to being clinically dehydrated. Most elderly patients, certainly probably 75 and above, unfortunately are also probably clinically malnourished as well, low protein stores and so forth. And that's also going to impact their ability for skin health. And then if, unfortunately, they develop a wound, the ability for them to heal that wound. So products like Ensure, Sustacal, if they're Glucerna, any of these kind of nutrients are very, very important. We take this very seriously in the hospital. This is a standard supplement. In the wound care center, anybody with a wound, we're always recommending that they supplement themselves with these nutritional supplements. You can get a lot of both protein as well as calories from, basically 1 8-ounce container. You want to, again, have a well-balanced diet. I feel like a nutritionist, but it's really important to emphasize these things. So again, fruits and vegetables, proteins, vitamins A and C are very important in skin health, particularly vitamin C, because that is going to help strengthen the production of some of the proteins in the skin that we talked about earlier. And again, I think I can't say enough about just overall hydration and supplementation of nutrients. And then finally, you want to exercise as much as you reasonably can. So for different people and different stages of their life, that exercise may be just getting out of the bed to chair 3 or 4 times a day, and that's great. If it's walking up and down, the hallway, that's great. If it's actually getting outside in the garden and doing work, but you really want to, make sure that you can exercise as much as you can. That's going to increase your blood supply, to your extremities. It's also going to make you thirsty. It's going to make you hungry. So it's going to help, in terms of your oral intake. Again, you want to get in the habit of doing good skin exams. And if you see anything that's different or unique, bring it to somebody's attention. Clearly, if you're a diabetic, I think the classic teaching for generations has been every diabetic should look at their feet at the end of every day. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen patients in the emergency department or the clinic who are really bad diabetics. They have absolutely no ability to feel anything at the soles of their feet, and they'll literally come in with tacks or nails embedded into their feet, and they have no idea why. Because they're wearing they're also walking barefoot, which is something they shouldn't be doing. But that's the reason you want to constantly do that. Otherwise, patients will suddenly look, and the wife will look at the foot for the first time in 2 weeks, and the patient will have a huge ulcer down to bone or something like that. And we hear this all the time. So I think that was my quick introduction into this, I think, very important topic. So I appreciate your attention.
Great. Thank you very much, Doctor. Do we have questions from Des? Commissioner Belding.
Yes, I do have a question. It sounds kind of slight considering all the topics you've covered, and it was really, really informative for me. I appreciate it so much. My father, quite elderly, just had a recent fall again this week, and he does have some skin tears often. And sometimes they'll say, well, we should treat it or, clean it and then, as you say, wrap it. And when he's gone to the doctor, they've done that and left that on for like a week. But then recently they've said, oh, we just want to leave it open to the air. Is there any kind of guide for us if you have an injury of what should be left open and what might be best more contained?
Pretty much nothing should be left open other than if there's a fungal infection or excoriation, so to speak.
Oh, wow.
We're 60% water, biologically speaking. Mm-hmm. So we heal best in a moist environment. And so the idea, historically, there's always been, this idea of first let it dry out, let it form a scab. That's right. Mother Nature's Band-Aid, let the scab fall off. That's very 20th century, thought. So now we really want to, most of our dressings are designed to keep a wound moist.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean excessively moist, but it means we heal best in a moist environment.
Like some kind of topical?
Correct. So if some wounds just have a tremendous amount of discharge, so we'll put products on to absorb some of that discharge, but again, do it in such a way, in a controlled way, so that it doesn't get completely dried out. Other wounds are very dry, and then we're actually putting on to some degree a lotion or some type of a hydrating gel to keep it moist. Now, the other idea, in relation to your father's situation with the skin tears are,
yes.
One of the reasons we now recommend to just kind of do it, clean the wound, re-drape the skin, put a special dressing on, and leave it that way, is the skin is so fragile that if you keep on changing it every day, you're actually going to create more trouble than just leaving it alone. And I always tell the patients, I can't guarantee that this is going to work. But if it does work, we might reduce a wound that might be 10 by 10 centimeters. Think of, meaning almost the entire forearm.
Yes. And
if a portion of it fails, it's still, the vast majority of it is healed. And then it's a little bit easier to heal it, So the key I would do is, try not to let really anything dry out. Okay. At least put some antibiotic ointment on on a wound and give it a shot. The reason the fungal wounds, the fungal wounds tend to, and you see those a lot in the groin, or people who are obese and so forth will have in the so-called skin folds. That's because the fungus, the yeast, they like those moist, wet environments. And so really what you have to do is try to dry that out as much as possible.
On the arms and the legs.
And the arms, right.
Wrapping and keeping. Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Burt.
Dr. Susky, thank you so much for that information. Very comprehensive and wonderful learning. One of the question that I had centers around the SPF minimums and things like that we see on a lot of these products that we go in and, you go into CVS and there's 25 products. Is there any recommendation regarding an SPF minimum in terms of, a product?
Right, so that's been evolving as well. So traditionally, it was around 15 to 20. That was sort of the standard. So in other words, today I'm kind of just driving around town and going to the office. In theory, I should be wearing an SPF. All of us, no matter what we're doing, should have that. As many of the women may know, many of the makeups have an SPF of about 15 to 20. I think it's been being pushed up now to about 20 in the makeups. And obviously that's done because the lower the SPF, the thinner amount that goes on. When you get into the hundreds, and if you go to, any of the big chains and so forth, you'll see the children's strength, and they're up there, in the hundreds. It's almost like a paste that you're putting on, So I would agree with the dermatologist. I think if you're just doing an average day's, normal work environment, so to speak, a 20 or something would be appropriate. If it's a weekend and you're going to be at the beach or you're going to be outside working in the garden, that's when you have to start pushing it up a little bit more if you're going to be swimming, things like that. And I would say most people now, the dermatologists are really particularly pushing into the 50s, I use the children's, sunscreen because my skin's very sensitive and, the children's strength, not so much a strength, but just a product. They don't have those nice smells to them and so forth. So they, and the smells, the scents are actually put into these products via the use of alcohol and preservatives. So again, the likelihood of developing skin allergies goes up with those kind of products. So I just like them. They don't cause the irritation around the skin and so forth. I burn very easily, unfortunately, so I use products in the 75 to 100 range. They're difficult to use, even when I'm out there, because they're so thick, but they're incredible. They really do work.
Thank you. And one other quick point, a lot of people seniors who are on maintenance medications, that can promote additional sensitivity to exposure. Is that
right?
Is that
right? Well, there's a whole bunch of medications, a lot of antibiotics in particular, that induce sun sensitivity. You're absolutely correct, and that's so that's another reason that they should be on. They should be using the sunscreen. The other thing, which I didn't comment on, but you just brought up, which is well worth discussing briefly, is many seniors are on immunosuppressive agents, steroids, and so forth. That's a whole, that's a discussion in and of itself. But unfortunately, steroids independently actually thin the skin. So patients who are on steroids, who are on blood thinners, so they have thin skin, they're not able to stop the bleeding. I mean, you can see how this just is a setup, for disaster.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Yes.
So what kind of moisturizer do you recommend?
Well, again,
since we're supposed to be moisturizing.
Well,
qualities without saying a brand name.
I would never tell a woman what moisturizer to use, But in general, I like because of my skin sensitivity, I use the so-called boring ones. Again, the ones that aren't going to have the nice scents to them, and they're not going to have a lot of preservatives and so forth. So the products that jump out are the Neutrogena product line, the Eucerin product line, products like Aquaphor, Aveeno, Cetaphil. Those are the really, and they're very reasonably priced. You can literally buy, vats of it for very reasonable prices. That's what I generally recommend. Those are the types of products that are used in the hospitals and the medical care facilities.
Thank you. Any other questions? Once again, Doctor, thank you very much for joining us today. Excellent presentation. We appreciate that. Thank you. And now we are on number 7 on our agenda for commissioner comments. And let's start on my right. Anyone have commissioner comments? No? 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 I have none. Yes. Thank you.
I just wanted to let everybody know that it's that time of the year again when we like to recognize all of the senior volunteers that have given so much to our community. So if you know or are involved in an organization that may have someone that they want to nominate, our nominations for Senior of the Year are now open. You can go to our website, toaks.org/seniors, and you can find the nomination information there and fill it out online. And the nominations close April 1st.
Great. Thank you very much, Commissioner Maria. Vice Chair Allen.
I just want to remind everybody that those of us that are wearing red, it's Heart Month, so make sure you take care of your heart with your physician and do once a year. It's good to have a checkup and make sure everything's going well.
Thank you, Vice Chair Allen. I will just mention and thank the Global Commission for another really terrific show. Martin and Lewis, a couple Sundays ago. You know, we are so lucky here in Thousand Oaks to have the Global Center and the Global Commission that provides really top-notch entertainment. So keep an eye open for it. $5 a ticket, you can't beat the price. Mm-hmm. And the entertainment is just terrific. I have enjoyed every single show I've attended. Thank you very much. And so now I would just like to invite everyone to the next televised meeting, which is going to be on Wednesday, March 6th, when our keynote speaker will be Dr. Diana Sarkissian, who will speak on nutrition and or supplements, facts and myths. So that is something you're not going to want to miss. And with that, I will close the meeting, and thank you very much for attending, and everyone out there in television land, thanks for joining us.